Good Monday morning, 17th of August, 2020. Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's sermon. If you were on Zoom with us, Pastor Phil Meisner, the assistant to our bishop, was our guest preacher. And Phil did some really nice things with that text about a Canaanite woman. And if you've been following this story along, the Abraham saga, your ears should have perked up when you heard Canaanite, because again it goes back to Canaan, the grandson of Noah, who was cursed because his dad accidentally walked in on Noah. It was Noah's fault, and the grandson, who's completely innocent, gets cursed. That's the biblical way of justifying why the Canaanites and all the descendants of Canaan must forever be treated by the Israelites as second-class citizens. I think that was really the point of what Jesus was trying to do. So I would have done something slightly different than what Pastor Phil did for yesterday's sermon, where Jesus calls a Canaanite woman a dog, essentially saying, well, it's not fair to give the children's bread to the dogs, when she asks Jesus to cure her daughter of a demon. I think Jesus purposely did it. I'm not saying Jesus would have used the N-word today, but I am saying that he would have used some kind of a racial slur purposely, and his disciples would have no doubt agreed with him and howled, and then he would have turned and said, "See, you are racist." I think Jesus uses that text to show that racism, classism, looking down on people of different races, color, family, has been around forever. It's part of our human makeup. It's part of the sickness, part of what sin is and does to us. Canaanite, dog. And who do we think are dogs? What are the words that we don't even want to say them? And yet they're in there. They're in our minds. They're in our memories. We remember parents and grandparents who maybe used words that we don't want to use. We don't want to have our children hearing us, or our grandchildren, God forbid, learning up with the same prejudice as we have. But they are in us. That is one of the marks of sin. And I think Jesus used that example in order to say to the disciples, now, if you want to be one of God's beloved, you need to be like this person that you look down on. Because right now, you're the one who's not cutting the mustard. You're the one who's not pleasing God. You and your prejudice don't fit the kingdom of God. God's love extends to everybody. As I say, I would have done something different with the text, but I chose to let Pastor Phil preach because that's part of the blessing of having lots of different voices, different pastors look at the same thing. It's part of what I call midrash, and I introduced the term some time ago and reinforced last week. What is midrash? It's taking the same verse, the same text, and doing different things with it at different times. The same person might see something different at a different time. And again, the Jewish understanding of midrash is that there could be up to 70 different ways to look at it. And the one yesterday, Pastor Phil introduced several different ways of looking at it. He introduced the possibility that Jesus was having a bad day and Jesus was crabby. And I'm introducing the possibility that Jesus intentionally did that, knowing the woman who is used to being treated like a dog and called a dog by Jews is going to accept it and accept whatever little blessing she can get. She doesn't believe she's entitled. And I think that's a key there in that passage. We don't come to God believing we're entitled. We come to God believing that we're the little puppies, the little dogs, scrounging around for the tidbits and accepting whatever leftovers we can get. We are beggars in the kingdom of God, says Luther. However, Abraham and his clan were far from beggars. In fact, we get the feeling over and over and over that they are quite wealthy. Isaac has had to leave. His father has died. Chapter 26 of Genesis starts off with this. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. I love the way the writer says that. Oh, this is a different famine. This is a later famine. There was one then too, but this is a different one. Isaac went to Gerar, to King Abimelech of the Philistines. Oh, you remember King Abimelech. Abraham visited him, and his wife Sarah was very beautiful, just like with Pharaoh, and he was afraid Abimelech would want his wife for himself, and so he says, this is my sister, and then Abimelech finds out that it's not his wife, that God is very, very angry with him. Well, that's all before, right? So Isaac goes to Abimelech and says, can we settle here in your land? And then some of the men says, oh, what about this woman, this wife of yours, this Rebecca? She's beautiful. And he says, oh, she's my sister. Well, in fact, she's his cousin, but she's also his wife. And again, he's thinking just like his dad did, like father, like son. Don't dare say, this is my wife, and trust that God will watch out. Well, then, verse 8, I love this. When Isaac had been there a long time, King Abimelech of the Philistines looked out of a window and saw Isaac fondling his wife, Rebekah. Abimelech called for Isaac and says, so she's your wife. Why did you say she's my sister? And it happens all over again. So Abimelech says, this guy's under God's protection. Don't anybody touch this woman or you will be put to death. So then, verse 12, Isaac sowed seed in the land. In the same year reaped 100-fold. Well, when we hear this, I think people in probably rural areas hear and go, wow, you plant one seed and you get 100. And we're going in rural mindset. Well, you better get 100. Yeah, you better get a lot. If you plant one, then it better make lots. You plant one portion of a potato, you can cut a potato up into many pieces, and each one of those will produce several potatoes. So from one potato, you can get 100. Yeah, from one grain, how many? I have lettuce, and the lettuce is going to seed. One little lettuce seed produced a beautiful head of lettuce, and I had dozens of heads of lettuce. And now one of them is going to seed, and it's going to produce thousands of lettuce seeds. So to say that it increased 100-fold, yeah, what it means is he had a successful crop. And it says, verse 13, and the man became rich. He prospered more and more until he became very wealthy. He possessed flocks and herds and a great household. Well, okay. So Isaac has inherited from his father. I mean, we already heard 2 chapters ago, Abraham gave everything to Isaac except for some of the stuff he gave to the children of his concubine, and some of it to his second wife, Ketubah, and of course Ishmael got a portion as well. But Isaac got the lion's share. He was already a rich man, and now he is incredibly wealthy. And Abimelech says in verse 16, go away from us, you become too powerful. So Isaac has to leave, and he has to go back into the land of Canaan. Verse 17, this curious story. Isaac dug a well that had been previously dug, but the Philistines had come and they'd fill in all the wells. They didn't want people just traveling through the area finding water. But Isaac dug the well, and somebody quarreled with him. Dug another one of his father's old wells, and somebody else says, no, that's ours. So then he dug a third well and said, this is now ours. Verse 22, he moved from there and dug another well. They did not quarrel over it. So he called it Rehoboth, saying, now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And then finally, he has his first conversation with God. Verse 24, that very night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you and make your offspring numerous for my servant Abraham's sake. So Isaac built an altar there, called on the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. So this is at Beersheba, where you hear the word beer, and beer, well, and water. And I know beer is mostly water, right? But when you hear beer, that means there's a well there. They dug a well, and then they called it beer something or other. So the water in a desert is everything. It's just a reminder of what we know to be true here, that without water, nothing grows. They dug wells and pulled water up so that the animals would have enough to drink. They would have pools of water, little wadis may appear here and there where springs came up as well. Did they have enough to actually pump it out and irrigate the land? Probably not quite so much. And the reason the Philistine land was better is because it's along the coast, the Mediterranean coast, and got some of that moisture, probably some of the rain that came in off the Mediterranean. We sometimes get rain here, but we live in a rain shadow. We get 6-7 inches a year without the irrigation, without that snowpack, supplemented by wells. We would not live here. This place would be as uninhabitable as was that land. But God chose that people and that land, that arid place, and in there they found enough water to prosper. Tomorrow I'll be in the church building. See you then.